Hi, hello everyone, morning or afternoon, whichever time you wake up to see this. Alright, so to close out our live drawing portion, and we're going to try to kind of breeze through this since we really have 2 weeks left of school until spring break hits. It's time to wrap up our live drawing section, well, landscape drawing section, which is live drawing, with drawing nature. We've done a lot of time with architecture, buildings, streets, and all that. It's time to come down to where it's nothing but God works here, or whichever you believe in. So, like with any other time, I am going to establish a picture plane, because yes, even though we are dealing with the natural world, perspective is still important. Now, is perfect perspective as important as it is when you're doing architecture? No. But it's still vital, so you're placing everything correctly. So now that I have my picture plane, I am just going to establish my horizon line. And let's go for a little path here. So I will make my vanishing point in the center. And spread out my vectors like I normally do. As a reminder, you want to make sure that your vectors are coming out of your vanishing point, not next to it, not out of the horizon line itself, but out of the vanishing point, like so. So with this one, we'll just label this forest path. And let's begin. Now, normally, if this was, say, a street view, we would be seeing pavement of some sort or sidewalks. But we're going to go for something that is more well-traveled, like a path where the grass has kind of died out because so many feet have gone across it. I'll catch up with this for a second before I continue. Okay. So the next thing you realize is that unless something is actually built on it, there's no perfect shape. Nothing is perfectly straight. Remember, this is natural, and everything in nature works in curves. So I'm going to establish these for my path, but I'm not just going to go straight towards the vanishing point and call it a day. I'm going to remember that yes, everything that is close to my vanishing point is going to be smaller and more compact. As I come out of it, I'm only going to loosely abide by my vectors here. Notice here, my hand is kind of shaking, and that is actually on purpose. Remember, we can't use full straight lines. What we can use is the shaking of our arms and hands to get almost a jagged or just rough view of a path here. Now that we have our path, we can worry about, say, a bit of grass in the center. And you'll notice I'm just doing very brief dashes with a pencil here. I'm basically going to do this to kind of like how moss grows over things. I'm just going to use more jagged and shaky lines to grow over the perfectly straight ones that are still going to be there, such as my horizon line. As you go along, you find that you're not using some of these vectors. You can just go ahead and erase them. Now, what about grass? Let's see how grass. Would I expect you to actually draw every single blade of grass? The answer to that is no, because that is literally impossible. Likely, you're just going to use a few curved lines, and they will grow in number the closer you are to the edge of your paper. Have some of it go over your path, because remember, the path is worn, but it is not developed. And seeing as how that this is grassland, honestly, even the horizon line, once you have established grass on it, you can go ahead and start messing with its curves. Now keep in mind, this is me going off of a few rough references, but for your actual project, you will be actually going outside. If you're remote, you'll have to go outside of your own house. I would suggest, like, say, a nearest park, whereas for those on campus, we'll be going around Life School itself. Now, will you be allowed to work off photographs? The answer is yes, because I don't expect you to stand up there the entire time. This isn't like, how I learned things in college, but it's also a case of, heck, today, the day I'm recording this, is raining outside, so that kind of puts a kibosh on what I'm doing. Now, also notice that I am still building hills and such behind here. Hills are not terribly common in the land mass we have here, so that's something you're going to have to get online if you want to try that. But keep this in mind, make sure that they are light. Not as light as the vectors, but you'll want them to be relatively light because as things get further away, they are going to use a lighter line. A thinner line at that. So right here what we have is grassland. Nice and simple. But now it's time to consider trees. Let me add this little bit of texture to my pathway here. Textures be very important in this. Now let's talk about trees. Now, a lot of what I see is people going, okay, here's one, maybe get a little branch here somewhere if you're lucky. Then do this. Put a big old knot hole in the center. Boom, there's a tree. This is not a tree. This is broccoli. When you want to do a tree, you have to remember here that not only is something curved, even if it's coming out of the ground, it curves out. So I am just going to say, go put one right here, one here, one over here, so it's going to be off of my picture plane. Here, and then I'll put some around here. Now, going by the roots, and yes, you want to start with the roots, you want to start off in your curve, and as you're going up, curve a little more. And you notice here, I am just going up and down, going back to the roots, and then coming back up, so making more curves. The reason for this is because this way, you're also kind of building up the bark on the tree. Because that's another problem here. The trees, when people draw them like this, are way too smooth. I might say, but Mr. Scott, trees aren't looking too balanced. Well, here's the thing. Trees don't have to be perfectly balanced. They are fully grounded by their roots in the dirt. So if one has, say, more branches on one side than the other, or the tree is leaning, that does not mean it's going to fall over. It just means that's how it grew. Now, once I have this much done, for the leaves, I'm going to use the same shaky hand method. Do not try to draw every single leaf. One, not all leaves are made the same, depending on the type of tree that you've been drawing. Here, that makes all the difference. What you want to do here is draw the mass of leaves. That also means going over some of your branches. When you do this, this creates what's called a canopy. Another thing to consider is that not every branch is going to have leaves. Like so. And the last thing is, do not make every tree the same. Even if they are of the same breed, they're not going to be the exact same. Some will have less leaves, some will have more of a left-leaning side, some right-leaning. More branches, fewer branches. You also have to keep in mind that some trees are also changed by not just nature, but man. If someone cuts down parts of a tree, that affects the growth as well. Some parts of it will grow larger, some will grow smaller. But you are noticing here, I'm still making sure that as they get further back, they're getting higher up on the picture plane, because remember, things are higher on the plane or farther away from the viewer. But they are also getting noticeably smaller. But you notice how I'm not just going to say, okay, I'm going to use this one, and start making something, because that's not how trees grow without being manipulated by mankind. And before I move on the other side, I'm just going to put some light shading. Once again, I'm just going to do that shaky method. Pointillism helps with this. Some very short hatching is also more than manageable. And as you get further back, you can start using more of the flat of your pencil. Because you don't want shadows to be the same throughout, not unless you're doing stark contrast, which it is more than possible to stark contrast with nature drawing. Just know that it's going to give it a very spooky appearance. And this one, we're going to bring in that other tree. Now, with nature drawing, well, really any perspective drawing, but especially with nature, there is no harm in having a nice, big, fat foreground element to really give the idea that things have been developed to grow this way. And remember, just like we did when doing interiors and exteriors, if something is that close to the viewer, you can just black it in, make it a silhouette. There we go. But when you now, make sure that you do your foreground element last. What's most important is that you keep drawing through your forms. If you draw around your foreground element, you're going to make mistakes like, say, suddenly, the top of this tree is off kilter from the bottom of it. And not a case of, oh, well, that's how it grew, as in, like, no, someone cut it with like a sword or something and just floated in space. Always draw through your forms. If you want to cover it later with more shading, that's fine. Now, once you get farther enough, well, far enough rather, you can start just kind of mucking up your trees, because at that point they're so far back that no one's going to be able to really tell what they are anyway. And this is almost like scribble. You notice even in paintings, this is actually what happens with a lot of nature drawings if you get close enough. Start turning some of the silhouettes, start just putting down blobs. It's all going to sell as, oh, this is just part of nature, because not everything can be readily seen. So see if you have a dense forest looking area. Finally, let's talk about where to put our light source. Now, something else that I see a lot of people do is that they'll just say put the sun over here or over here and just have it shine down. Okay, that's also a no. One, light does not work in solid lines. If you want to show light shining down, God rays, however you want to put them, then that's done through your shading. You use your eraser, or it's with your paint, or just how you blend. But you do not use actual lines that you put down on the paper. If anything, you'd be using implied lines, which are lines that appear in between the lines you actually draw. Another thing, do not put your light source, if your light source is a sun or a moon, please do not put it in the corner. Rarely does light ever actually work that way. So in my case, I'm going to put it over here. And how the background goes all depends on what time it is. If I'm saying that this is the sun, now I'll put some shading at the bottom here. And notice that I'm not moving in a straight line, I'm moving in a curve. So if our light source is over here, that means that our trees and such will be casting shadows in opposite directions. Again, you do not want to use just straight lines for this, because remember, it's not casting shadow over pavement. It's not casting shadow on a sidewalk, a perfectly flat object. It's casting shadow over grass and dirt. This is where you can adhere a little bit more to your vectors. But even then, I would not try to do one-to-one. And notice I'm also doing the same kind of hatching style of shading for the grass as well. There you have it. Now we're going to work with this for now. We will mix in some man-made things like pavement sets, since a lot of you will be drawing outside of the school, for those of you that are face-to-face, or for those of you that are going to parks, or if you live in the country, you'll also see some man-made objects if there's, actual roads. In those cases, you do want to adhere to vectors because those are man-made objects. We're going to cut here for today, and when we come back, we're going to go over things like mountains, beaches, and then how to paint them. Because yes, your next project will require paint. You have a good day.